Hey, this session is about how to use the top selling techniques for making sales calls on the phone. And the topic that we're talking today is using the upfront contract or agreement to guide the process and make sure that your prospect knows where you're going, as well as to make sure you know where it's going and have control over the sales call. One thing I want to point out is that this principle works both for telephone sales. It's something that is the foundation of a good sales call and a good sales presentation. How many times have you met salespeople, or how many times have you? I mean, I've done it plenty myself. Anybody who's gotten proficient with sales has done this lots, and then they got to a point where they got sick and tired of not knowing what was going to happen and using wishful thinking, hoping that things were going to work out. But how many times have you engaged in a selling interaction where you're just winging it? You didn't know what the prospect, what they were thinking, where they were going. It's just, trying to make sure that everything runs smoothly, and we get a meeting. They don't tell me to F off, and hopefully at the end of it, we end up with a sale. The whole point of this is to be upfront, to know exactly where you guys stand, and to guide things properly. So you do this with effective questions, which I'm going to talk about in another video, but questions are the answer when it comes to effective selling. Most people talk too much. The only time that we should be talking as salespeople is when we're asking another question. Really, there's very few times when we should be running our mouth, and this is the most common error that amateur salespeople make: is they talk too much, trying to make themselves look smart to their prospects, and it doesn't work. They just don't care. They're going to drown you out. You sound like everybody else. It's over. So the principle of the upfront agreement would be, if you listen to the other video where I talked about the very first call. An example of an upfront agreement would be that first thing where I would say something like, "Hey, Mike, this is a cold call. You probably hate getting these as much as I hate having to do them. If it's okay with you, I'm going to take 30 seconds of your time, share the reason for my call, and at the end of that, you can decide whether or not we keep talking." That's an upfront agreement, because you get the person's agreement to move forward. You've also given them the opportunity to say no, and they know exactly what's going to happen to you. The whole premise is to make sure that the prospect knows exactly what's going to happen next, because when people don't know what's going to happen, they just want to get rid of you. They don't feel safe. They feel insecure, all that stuff. So they're just going to get rid of you. And it's not fun as a salesperson to go through that. So upon, going through the process of discovering what kinds of challenges, issues, struggles, pain, whatever that my product or service can solve for this prospect, once I've really gauged what that pain level is like for them, and discovered whether or not they have the money to move forward on the solution, and they have the authority to make the decision, then we get into talking, something like, "Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my call, or talk about this." Naturally, the next thing that I want to do is get together and discuss this, and I'm gonna have a lot of questions for you, because I really want to make sure that this is going to be a fit for you. Obviously, you're going to want to get to know me and get to know our company and get a feel for what we do and how we may be able to serve your needs. And typically what happens after that is one of two things. Either this is going to make sense and we move forward, and together we decide what that next step is, or we decide that this isn't a go. Mike, throughout this process, if I get the feel that my product or service isn't going to be a fit for you, I might have to tell you no and back out of this. Is that okay with you? You okay with me telling you no? And throughout this process, you might find that, hey, this is not a fit for me. Are you okay with telling me no, so that we don't carry this on and waste each other's time? It's things like that that will make all the difference, because seriously, how many salespeople are doing that? Very few, if any. There's so few people who use this type of technique, and it's usually, this comes about because if you've done it enough and you've stuck through the grind, and so many people haven't had sufficient training, you get so sick and tired of it that it's like, there's nothing worse than spending the time making the phone calls, setting up the meetings, doing the presenting, and doing the quotes and doing the bids and all that stuff, and then getting to the end of it and finding out your prospect doesn't really care. They were kind of interested. The whole thing was based on interest, or they didn't have the money, or they weren't even the person who had the authority to make the decision. There's nothing worse than that. So the whole point of the upfront agreement, and a lot of the stuff that I teach in my sales training, is to get that out of the way right away and make sure you're in front of a qualified prospect. Because if you're going to have a problem, well, let's fight about it right off the bat, instead of waiting. You've put hours of dedication and time into the possible sale, which is never going to happen, and then all the emotional attachment to what you think might be a sell. So we want to make sure that that we're engaging in this and being upfront, and people love that. They just like to know where they stand. So for more training, guys, Click the link below, get yourself registered, and we'll see you on the inside. Thanks.